A therapist charges you $300 an hour to teach you a mental trick. You sit in a leather chair. You nod along. You write it down in a notebook. And you leave feeling like you've just discovered something revolutionary. But here's the thing no one tells you. A Roman emperor, a man who ruled the most powerful empire on earth, wrote that exact same trick in his private journal nearly 2,000 years ago. He never charged anyone a cent. He never published it for profit. He wrote it for himself, by candlelight, in a tent on the battlefield. And what he wrote became one of the most powerful psychological frameworks in human history. What if the most powerful psychology tools ever created were already discovered by ancient philosophers, and you've been paying to relearn what was always yours? Today, we're going to walk through 7 techniques that modern psychology now packages and sells at premium prices, and show you that every single one of them was practiced by Stoic philosophers centuries before the field of psychology even existed. This isn't about dismissing therapy. Therapy changes lives. This is about empowering you with knowledge that should have never been hidden behind a paywall in the first place. Number 1. Cognitive reframing. In modern cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, there is a foundational technique called cognitive reframing. Your therapist teaches you to take a negative thought, examine it, and consciously reinterpret it in a way that serves you. You lose your job. Instead of thinking, my life is over, you learn to think, this is an opportunity to find work that actually fulfills me. Psychologists have spent decades refining this method. Research papers have been written. Clinical trials conducted. It is considered one of the most effective tools in all of mental health treatment. But Marcus Aurelius was doing this in the year 170 AD. In his private journal, a book we now call Meditations, he wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." Read that again. What stands in the way becomes the way. He called it turning obstacles upside down. When something blocked his path, he didn't resist it. He reframed it. The obstacle wasn't separate from the journey, it was the journey. Aaron Beck, the father of CBT, published his framework in the 1960s. Marcus Aurelius was practicing it 18 centuries earlier. He just never gave it a clinical name. Number 2. Anxiety exposure therapy. If you've ever seen a therapist for anxiety, you may have been taught a method called exposure therapy. The idea is simple but counterintuitive. Instead of avoiding the things you fear, you deliberately imagine them. You sit with the worst-case scenario. You visualize the failure, the loss, the rejection, and you feel it fully. By facing the fear in your mind before it happens, you strip it of its power. Modern therapists call this imaginal exposure. It's considered cutting edge. But here's what most people don't understand. Seneca, the Stoic philosopher, advisor to Emperor Nero, was teaching this exact method 2,000 years ago. He called it premeditatio malorum. The premeditation of evils. Every morning, Seneca would sit quietly and imagine everything that could go wrong that day. Betrayal. Financial ruin. Death. He wrote, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality." But his solution wasn't to stop imagining. It was to imagine deliberately. To rehearse adversity. So that when life actually struck, and it always strikes, you would not crumble. You would already have lived through it in your mind. Modern exposure therapy is Seneca's morning routine repackaged with a clinical label. And this is where it gets interesting. Because the deeper you look into modern psychology, the more you realize just how many of its foundations are ancient. Number 3. The dichotomy of control. Acceptance and commitment therapy, ACT, is one of the fastest growing therapeutic frameworks in the world. It is taught in universities, practiced in hospitals, and sold in best-selling self-help books. Its core principle: separate what you can control from what you cannot. Accept what is outside your control. Commit to acting on what is within it. This idea is treated as a modern psychological breakthrough. But Epictetus, a former slave who became one of the most influential philosophers in history, taught this exact principle in the 1st century AD. He opened his most famous work, the Enchiridion, with these words: "Some things are within our power, while others are not." That's it. That's the foundation of ACT. Epictetus didn't learn this in a university. He learned it in chains. He was a slave who had no control over his body, his freedom, or his circumstances. And yet he discovered the one thing no master could ever take from him: his mind. His judgments. His responses. Stephen Hayes, the creator of ACT, has openly acknowledged the Stoic roots of his work. The repackaging is deliberate. The debt is real. Number 4. And this is the one most people don't see coming. Cognitive diffusion. There's a technique in modern psychology where a therapist asks you to take a painful thought, say, "I am worthless," and instead of believing it or fighting it, you simply observe it. You hold it at a distance. You say to yourself, "I notice that I am having the thought that I am worthless." You don't engage with it. You don't argue. You just watch it, like watching a leaf float down a stream. This is called cognitive diffusion, and it is considered one of the most sophisticated interventions in modern therapy. Marcus Aurelius practiced this every single night. He would write to himself, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." But he went further. He wrote, "Today I escaped anxiety." Or no, I discarded it, because it was within me, in my own perceptions, not outside. Think about what he's doing here. He's not fighting the anxiety. He's not suppressing it. He's observing it. He's noticing that it is a product of his own perceptions, not reality itself. Then he's stepping back from it. He's diffusing from the thought. 1800 years before the term cognitive diffusion was ever coined, a Roman emperor was practicing it in a war tent by firelight. Now, here's where the pattern becomes undeniable. Because the next technique is one used in emergency rooms, trauma clinics, and military psychology programs worldwide. Number 5. The view from above. If you've ever had a panic attack, you know the feeling. Your chest tightens. Your thoughts spiral. Every problem becomes enormous. Everything feels catastrophic. Modern therapists use a grounding technique to pull people out of this spiral. They guide you to mentally zoom out. To imagine yourself from far above, seeing yourself sitting in a room, in a building, in a city, on a continent. Everything that felt overwhelming a moment ago begins to shrink. Your problem doesn't disappear. But your relationship to it changes. You see it in proportion. The ancient Stoics had a name for this. They called it the view from above. Marcus Aurelius wrote about it explicitly. He would imagine looking down on the whole of human activity, the markets, the arguments, the wars, the petty jealousies, and see them for what they truly are. Small. Temporary. He wrote, "How small a part of the boundless and unfathomable time is assigned to every man. How small a part of the whole of the earth." This wasn't escapism. It was perspective. And it's the exact same mechanism modern psychology uses to interrupt the catastrophic thinking loop in PTSD and panic disorder. The Stoics didn't just stumble on this. They engineered it. They practiced it daily. It was a core spiritual exercise, not a trendy wellness hack. Number 6. Journaling and self-interrogation. In CBT clinics around the world, therapists hand their patients a worksheet called a thought record. You write down the situation that triggered you. You write the automatic thought that arose. You write the emotion you felt. Then you challenge the thought. You question it. You ask, is this thought based on evidence or assumption? This method is so effective that some studies have shown it produces results comparable to antidepressant medication for mild to moderate depression. But Seneca was doing this every single night nearly 2 millennia ago. He describes his evening practice in De Ira, on anger. He would lie in bed, review every action of his day, and cross-examine himself like a judge. He wrote, "When the light has been removed and my wife has fallen silent, I examine my entire day and go back over what I have done and said." He would ask himself, where did I fail? What habit did I let control me? What could I have done differently? This is a thought record. This is CBT journaling. This is the gold standard of modern self-monitoring practice. Seneca just did it without the worksheet. Number 7. Memento mori, or what psychologists now call mortality salience. In modern existential therapy, therapists sometimes ask a patient to deeply contemplate their own death. Not to depress them, but to clarify what matters. Research from psychologist Irvin Yalom shows that confronting your mortality doesn't create despair, it creates urgency. It burns away trivial concerns. It forces you to ask the only question that matters: am I living the life I actually want? The ancient Stoics didn't just contemplate death occasionally. They made it a daily practice. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think." Seneca echoed him, "Let us prepare our minds as if we had come to the very end of life." This wasn't morbid. It was freedom. Because the person who has made peace with death is the person who is finally free to live. So here's the bigger picture. Here's what all 7 of these techniques point to. Modern psychology did not invent the tools for a better mind. It rediscovered them. It took practices that ancient philosophers refined through decades of real-world suffering, through slavery, exile, plague, and war, and it translated them into clinical language. And that translation has been valuable. Therapy is real. Science matters. The research confirms what works. But the origin should not be forgotten. Because the deeper truth is this: you do not need permission to heal your own mind. You do not need a credential to question your own thoughts. You do not need to sit in someone else's office to practice the art of self-examination. Marcus Aurelius was not a psychologist. Seneca was not a therapist. Epictetus had no degree. And yet between the 3 of them, they built a system of mental resilience so powerful that modern science keeps rediscovering it, keeps revalidating it, and keeps being astonished that it works. The wisdom was never lost. It was just waiting for you to pick it up. 2,000 years ago, a slave, a statesman, and an emperor all arrived at the same conclusion, that the mind, once trained, becomes its own healer. And the cost of that training has always been the same. Not $300. Not a prescription. Just the willingness to sit with yourself, and begin.